Silence reigns in Westminster Abbey, 2,000 people standing in respectful silence. Suddenly, 9-year-old Princess Charlotte breaks protocol and makes the shocking move that leaves everyone stunned. King Charles's eyes fill with tears, witnessing that moment. The media goes wild, and the world talks about it. What was Charlotte's move that created such a sensational impact? Also, when you watch the story to the end, you'll learn the shocking sentence that Princess Charlotte whispered in a veteran's ear. November 11th, 2024, Remembrance Day. In the heart of London, Westminster Abbey was hosting one of history's most respectful ceremonies. This ceremony, held to commemorate the wars where thousands of people lost their lives, was one of the most serious and protocol-bound events of the royal family. In the early hours of the morning, Princess Charlotte was getting ready at Kensington Palace. As the 9-year-old princess put on her dark navy coat, her mother, Kate Middleton, was explaining how she should behave during the ceremony. "Charlotte, today is a very important day. We will stand motionless during the moment of silence. This is very important." Charlotte nodded, but there was curiosity in her eyes. "Mom, why does everyone look so sad?" Kate paused. How could she explain the pain of war to a 9-year-old child? Still, she chose her words carefully and spoke in a way she could understand. "Dear Charlotte, in this ceremony we remember very brave people who fought for our country, some who never came back home." When they arrived at Westminster Abbey, the atmosphere was quite heavy. Among the magnificent walls of Gothic architecture, hundreds of war veterans, royal family members, and statesmen had taken their places. Charlotte stood next to her older brother George and younger brother Louis. When the ceremony began, 9-year-old Charlotte was watching her surroundings with curiosity. The atmosphere in the Abbey was quite heavy for a child. Everyone's serious faces, the silence and sorrow that dominated the environment had affected her. At exactly 11 a.m., the traditional 2-minute silence began. The 2,000 people in Westminster Abbey stood motionless. Only distant traffic sounds and the wind rustling the leaves could be heard. When the last sound of the bells from the great clock tower faded away, a deep silence fell over the Abbey. This silence was so intense that Charlotte could even hear her own breathing. The simultaneous stillness of thousands of people around her was fascinating, but also a bit frightening for the little princess. Charlotte also took the silence position, clasped her hands beside her, and slightly bowed her head. But 2 minutes was a very long time for a child. When even the first 30 seconds passed, she felt her feet beginning to tingle. Her eyes began scanning the adults around her. Everyone's serious, even sorrowful expressions affected her. The other members of the royal family standing next to her mother displayed perfect posture. Even her older brother George, though only 11 years old, stood with great seriousness. Charlotte felt like a small sapling in the middle of a giant forest of respect. It was then that Charlotte's eyes caught sight of an elderly man sitting in the rows on the right. The man was about 85 years old, a former soldier with war medals on his chest. Colonel Reynolds, one of the veterans of the Falklands War. His medals glittered silently on his chest, each carrying a story, each carrying a memory. Colonel Reynolds had an expression on his face that Charlotte had never seen before. The man's eyes were filled with tears, and he was trying not to let his chin tremble. The old soldier was perhaps reliving his war memories from 40 years ago. He had clasped his hands tightly together, as if trying to hold himself together. Charlotte's heart tightened. She couldn't fully understand why this old man was so sad, but her instincts were telling her something. The anxiety she felt when she heard her brother Louis crying in the silence of the house was now emerging again in her heart. The first minute of the silence had passed. The silence in Westminster Abbey was so profound that you could hear a pin drop. Charlotte was still watching the old colonel. The man could no longer hold back his tears. A tear slowly trickled down the colonel's cheek and stopped on his chin. Childish questions began to spin in Charlotte's mind. Why was this old man crying? Was he one of the brave people her mother and father had told her about? Maybe he had lost his friends in war, just like Charlotte had lost her cat. How sad she had been then, crying for nights. The little princess looked at the colonel's medals. Each one probably had a story. Maybe one of these medals was given for his lost friend. Charlotte would be sad for days, even when she lost one of her toys at home. What would it be like to lose real friends? It was then that a thought crossed Charlotte's mind. At home, what did she do when her brother Louis cried? She would go to him and comfort him, hold his hand, tell him everything is all right. This old man was crying too, so why shouldn't she do the same thing? But then she remembered her mother's words from that morning. We will stand motionless during the moment of silence. This is very important. And more importantly, there were protocols. Despite her young age, Charlotte knew how important protocols were. No one could move during the moment of silence. Charlotte looked toward her mother. Kate Middleton's eyes were closed. She was in deep, respectful silence. There was a peaceful but serious expression on her face. Her father, William, was equally motionless, his hands behind his back, his head bowed. Her grandfather, King Charles, was in the front row, displaying perfect posture. Everyone was following the rules. But something began to well up inside Charlotte. The old man's tears were breaking the little princess's heart. Each tear seemed to create pain in her own heart. Her mother had always told her, try to understand others' feelings. Now, she could feel that old man's pain. Protocols, rules, even her mother's warnings. None of these mattered to Charlotte at that moment. The voice inside her was stronger. That man is sad, you can make him happy. The 9-year-old princess took a deep breath and made a brave decision. As her heart began beating rapidly, she felt a slight trembling under her feet. This would probably be the bravest decision she would make in her life. Charlotte began walking slowly, on her tiptoes. No one noticed her first step. As her small shoes moved silently on the Abbey's cold marble floor, her heart was beating so fast that she felt it might burst from her chest. On her second step, her older brother George's eyes caught her. George watched his little sister with a bewildered expression. His eyes had widened as if to say, "What are you doing?" But he didn't dare make a sound. Speaking during the moment of silence would be a major protocol violation. He just followed Charlotte's movements with curiosity. When Charlotte took her third step, a palace official standing in the row right behind them noticed. The man frowned and began thinking about what he should do. Should he try to stop the little princess, or should he remain silent to avoid disrupting such an important ceremony? Fourth, fifth step. Charlotte was now moving away from her family. More and more eyes began watching her with each step. As she passed through the crowd in respectful silence, she could feel people's frowns, their bewildered looks. Some were watching her from the corner of their eyes. Others were looking at her without completely turning their heads. There was only one thought in Charlotte's mind. That old man is crying. I must comfort him. This simple, pure thought was guiding her steps. With each step she became a little braver, a little more determined. The Abbey's acoustics reflected Charlotte's steps. Even the smallest sound could be heard in this sacred place, but she was walking so slowly and carefully that her steps made almost no sound. Charlotte walked through the crowd in respectful silence toward Colonel Reynolds. Only a few meters remained now. Her heart was beating faster with each step, but her eyes were fixed on her target. Seeing the old colonel crying made her inner determination even stronger. Some people in Westminster Abbey were beginning to notice Charlotte's movement. Officials were casting bewildered glances. This was against protocol. No one, especially during the moment of silence, could move, but no one dared to stop a 9-year-old princess either. Some war veterans became emotional seeing Charlotte coming toward them. The little princess's courage and determination had affected them. Displaying such great behavior at such a young age was surprising everyone. Charlotte finally reached Colonel Reynolds. The old soldier was surprised to see the little princess coming toward him. His eyes were still filled with tears, but now there was also amazement in these tears. The tears were still glistening on his face, but he no longer felt alone. Without any hesitation, Charlotte took the old colonel's hand. Her small hand had enveloped the colonel's large, aged hand. At that moment, time seemed to have stopped in Westminster Abbey. 9-year-old Princess Charlotte was holding the hand of 85-year-old war veteran Colonel Reynolds, looking at him with understanding eyes. Colonel Reynolds couldn't understand what was happening at first. Then he felt the warmth in the little princess's hand. The innocence and compassion in Charlotte's eyes touched the old soldier's heart. "Everything is all right," whispered Charlotte, lowering her voice so only the colonel could hear. Meanwhile, other people in the abbey were beginning to notice this scene. Some were shocked, others were moved. A small child making such a natural and sincere gesture was affecting everyone. When Kate Middleton opened her eyes, she saw her daughter next to Colonel Reynolds. Her first reaction was fear. Charlotte had broken protocol. But when she examined the scene more carefully, she realized the beauty of what was happening. Prince William also followed his wife's gaze and saw what his daughter was doing. Instead of feeling anxious, he smiled with pride. King Charles was the first person to see this scene. While watching his granddaughter's spontaneous action, his eyes filled with tears. At that moment, he was feeling two things: anxiety about the protocol being broken on one hand, and pride about Charlotte's shown compassion on the other. Charles remembered his own childhood. At that age, no one would dare to behave like that toward him. But Charlotte was different. She was acting with natural compassion that came from within. The last 30 seconds of the silence were passing. Charlotte was still holding the colonel's hand. The old man was no longer crying. There was deep gratitude in his eyes. When the final seconds came, Charlotte quietly whispered something in the colonel's ear. Only the colonel could hear exactly what she said, but those words would change the old soldier's life. When the moment of silence ended, there was a strange atmosphere in Westminster Abbey. Normally, people would maintain their seriousness at such ceremonies, but this time was different. Princess Charlotte's action had changed the entire atmosphere. Charlotte slowly returned to her family's side. Instead of scolding her daughter, her mother Kate embraced her. "I'm so proud of you," Kate whispered in her ear. William also stroked his daughter's head. "You did something wonderful, Charlotte," he said. But the real surprise came from King Charles. When the ceremony ended, Charles came directly to his granddaughter and knelt down to Charlotte's level. "Today you taught me something very important," said Charles, with waves of emotion in his voice. "Protocols are important, but compassion is more important. You showed that today." After the ceremony, the media began asking questions about what Charlotte had done, but the real story would come from Colonel Reynolds' mouth. Colonel Reynolds was one of the last remaining veterans of the Falklands War. In 1982, when he was only 23 years old, he had participated in the war. In that war, he had lost his closest friend. Every year on Remembrance Day, Reynolds remembered his lost friend. He attended ceremonies, but this year was particularly difficult. Health problems and old age had greatly affected him. "I've been at these ceremonies for 40 years, Reynolds later told the press, "but I had never experienced anything like this. That little princess, she was like an angel." Charlotte's words whispered to the colonel also came to light. "Your friend would be proud of you," she had said. Charlotte's action caused a great stir in the media. The hashtag Princess Charlotte became trending on social media. People were sharing video clips of the little princess, praising her compassionate action. BBC prepared a special program titled The Little Princess's Big Heart. CNN International described the event as the most emotional moment of the year. But the most important comment came from Buckingham Palace. The palace spokesperson stated in his announcement, "Princess Charlotte's spontaneous action perfectly reflects the values of the royal family. Compassion and empathy are the cornerstones of our monarchy." Charlotte's action created deep impacts not only in the media, but also in society. Donations to charities in England increased by 300%, Applications for volunteer work broke records. Especially aid organizations for war veterans announced that they were inspired by Charlotte's behavior that day. The organization, called Royal British Legion, launched a special campaign in Charlotte's honor. Schools also learned from this event. Many primary schools in England started empathy education programs called Charlotte's Compassion. But perhaps the most important change occurred in royal protocols. King Charles made new arrangements for children to behave more comfortably during ceremonies. "Protocols are important, but humanity is more important," Charles made a statement. "This is what my granddaughter taught me." The ceremonies at Westminster Abbey became more flexible now. Children's natural behaviors were accepted, even encouraged. This event also affected Charlotte's future education. Kate and William hired special teachers to develop their daughter's empathy skills. Psychology, social service, and diplomacy classes were added to Charlotte's curriculum. The aim was to develop her natural compassion ability. "Charlotte has the potential to be a future leader," said royal expert Margaret Stevens. "She's not just following protocol, she's listening to her heart." A year later, Charlotte was again at Westminster Abbey during the 2025 Remembrance Day ceremony. This time, Colonel Reynolds was also invited as a special guest. Before the ceremony, Charlotte and the Colonel met again. Colonel Reynolds told Charlotte how he had changed over the past year. "You changed my life, little princess," said the Colonel. "Now I live not with the pain of the past, but with hope for the future." Charlotte smiled. "Everyone deserves love," she replied. Royal experts think Charlotte's behavior is very important for the future of the monarchy. They say she bridges traditional protocols with modern empathy. "Charlotte represents the new face of the royal family," says historian Dr. James Richardson. "She's not ignoring protocols, she's humanizing them." This approach has increased support for the monarchy, especially among the younger generation. Young people who saw Charlotte's behavior find the royal family more approachable and understanding. Princess Charlotte's 2-minute action in Westminster Abbey was not just childhood innocence. That action became a moment that shaped the future of the monarchy. A 9-year-old princess holding the hand of an 85-year-old war veteran renewed the world's faith in the power of compassion. This story shows us that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest gestures. The courage and compassion Charlotte showed that day touched not only one colonel's heart, but the heart of the entire world. And perhaps most importantly, that action showed that future generation leaders can be both respectful of protocol and humane. Charlotte didn't just break protocol that day, she built the future. This is how 9-year-old Princess Charlotte's 2 minutes of courage in Westminster Abbey made the world cry and changed the future of the monarchy. See you in the next video.